Yeah, eat, sleep, fantasy, you rockin' with the best. NFL Fantasy Football Podcast. We talking mock drafts, running backs, better follow the conversation with John, Dale, Christian, and Armando. Screaming Eat Nation, we doing what we like. Tune in every week, guarantee we get it hype. Fantasy football enthusiasts, I know you plan to be joining us on Eat, Sleep, Fantasy. Yeah, Eat, Sleep, Fantasy. Eat, Sleep, Fantasy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Eat, Sleep, Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for joining us, downloading, and listening to us. We appreciate it. Today, we have something a little bit different than normal. John Chapman and myself, we were joined by Pat Lane in the Pat's Pulpit on his podcast, and we did a really fun mock draft. I think we went 8 or 9 rounds. We talked a little bit Fantasy Football 101, so if you're maybe new into fantasy football or if you just want kind of a refresher course, on some basic strategies and stuff before we do the mock draft, this is an episode to listen to. I know we did a mock draft previous episode. We just want to give you some different opinions and different viewpoints. You can't go wrong with getting more information, and we wanted to keep pumping out content to you guys. So stay tuned for that in just a second. But before we do that, I wanted to mention Nitrogen Sports. You guys can go to our website, eatsleepfantasy.com, and click on the banner for Nitrogen Sports. They are the #1 Bitcoin betting site on the internet. I think they're one of the oldest as well. You could bet on all kinds of different sports, from football to basketball, everything in between. So make sure you check that out. If you guys sign up using that banner on our website, not only do you get into a free NFL Survivor pool, which is pretty awesome because you can win free bets on the website and then turn those bets, if you win, into real money, and that's all free if you sign up and you get into there. But if you use that banner on our site, you get in the Survivor pool, but then you also get into another secret pool for all of our listeners. So it's really, really cool stuff. Definitely check them out. Go to eatsleepfantasy.com and check out the banner right on top of the page. So for now, sit back, relax. We are going to get into the episode here with Pat Lane. Please check out his podcast as well. Like I said, that podcast name is Pat's Pulpit. He talks everything Patriots football. A really knowledgeable guy on the team. So check that out. And we appreciate it, guys. And stay tuned.
All right, joining us today for our fantasy football special, we have John Chapman and Dale DeMont. They are from Eat Sleep Fantasy, so it is a fantasy football podcast, obviously, but it's also a fantasy football website. They do a ton of really cool fantasy football things all year long, not just at draft time, but especially this is kind of their big time at draft time. So Dale and John, welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for
Yeah,
having
glad
us.
to be here. Obviously, this is my 3rd year with you, Pat, during this time. Is that right?
It is. It's the first time you've been on this show.
Oh, okay. What's up?
but-
All right, new show.
But it's your 3rd time with me, and so it's been cool. We've been hanging for a while.
Like best friends, pretty much.
Pretty much, that's how it works.
Correct. Bunk beds.
We're best internet friends. We've never met before, but we've we've seen each other and stuff. So I'm gonna kind of get right into it. There's a few things that I want to start. So we are gonna do a mock draft today, guys. But what we're also going to do is I just want to start with some basic strategies just at how you need to approach the draft. So for me personally, when I look at the draft and I'm starting my review for the draft and my research for the draft, I always read Matthew Berry's Draft Day Manifesto. I just feel like for me, it just grounds me again into what I'm looking for. And one of the simple quotes that he has, and I think that, it is really important. And he says it like 6 times, but he says, at a fundamental level, fantasy football is entirely about minimizing risk and giving yourself the best odds to win on a weekly basis. What do you guys think about that? Like, now I subscribe to that, but like, what do you guys think about that specific quote?
Yeah, I mean, 100% here. And this really goes, if you're playing fantasy football and you're looking at other sites for rankings and all that stuff, you're never going to get the exact call every single time. But what you can do, you can minimize risk, exactly what he says. You look at your players, you say, okay, for instance, Travis Kelce for that week, he has the odds most of the time to be the top scoring tight end. but you're not going to be right 100% of the time. Travis Kelce is not going to be number one for 16 weeks in a row, or 15 weeks out of the season, or whatever it is. So yeah, definitely minimizing risk is the way to go, especially when you're looking at rankings week to week, for sure.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. No two drafts are going to be the same. So let's just say hypothetically you're drafting out of the 7th spot. Even if you did 100 drafts out of the 7th spot, there are certain guys you can't get because of where you're at. Like, you can't get Saquon or Christian McCaffrey if you're drafting out of the 7th spot. So what you have to do is you have to look out of that little window, and you're going to be dealing with guys like James Conner, Hopkins, Adams, Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott, right? So if you're looking at those 4 guys just in this one specific example, I don't think anybody right now would disagree. A guy like Zeke, even though the upside is absolutely amazing, there is so much risk there. And so if we put the principle of minimizing risk into this equation, he's going to be a guy that's going to fall further than we would like, because we don't know if he's going to play. I personally think that he will, but we saw this happen last year. A lot of people went out and drafted Le'Veon Bell. Well, guess what? Never took one snap. And so, right. Another thing that Matthew Berry kind of got famous for, he was very famous anyway, but he coined was, you can lose your draft in the first few rounds, you can't win it. So make sure that you are going for that solid double. Tony Gwynn, he's in the Hall of Fame for a reason. You can just singles and doubles will get you to where you need to be, especially early. So make sure you minimize early. Now, where I will disagree with his statement about minimizing risk is later in the draft, whenever you're talking 8th, 9th, 10th round, it's time to swing for the fences there. Because even if you miss, that's okay. You can miss on a 9th round pick and still win your league. Missing on a 1st or 2nd round pick, that's a whole nother story. So you want to shift your focus throughout the draft as it gets deeper and go for some of those more upside plays.
Right. No, I agree with that. And I think to your point, John, I believe he said on average about 30% of your points for your entire season comes from your 1st and 2nd round picks.
Yep.
So certainly if you're going to be more risky at the end, it's fine. But those first 2 picks, if you don't hit on those first 2 picks, it's almost impossible. Those people that drafted Bell in the 1st round, I would say the vast majority of them did not make the playoffs, because you just can't make the playoffs with your best player not playing the entire season. It just doesn't work that way. And so I think that's a big part. The other thing too that he always talks about, which I think is important, that anyone that talks about fantasy football talks about, but it's one thing that people just don't consider for some reason. They just seem to forget about it at times, is your league settings, right? If you play in different leagues, you're going to have different rules. You're going to have different type of rosters. So how deep is your bench? Is it a PPR league? Is it a non-PPR league? Is it a half-point PPR league? Do you get points for carries? How many points do you get for a passing touchdown? How many yards per how many passing yards per point? So on and so forth, all these different things. And that changes what your strategy should be and the types of players you should be going after. If it's a non-PPR league, you should not be targeting Julian Edelman early, because he's a guy who's going to get a lot of targets and a lot of catches, but not a ton of touchdowns. So, historically and typically for him, you're not looking at him in a non-PPR league because there's not as much upside for him, because there's not a lot of touchdown or yardage upside.
No, I'm with you completely. And one of the things that people don't understand is very similar to what you said. You have to find whatever advantage you can, because in today's fantasy world, everybody is reading Matthew Berry. ESPN, kind of watching NFL Network, everybody's operating under this exact same value. So once somebody says, oh, you should take so-and-so, that's one of the big top media personalities, everybody hears that. So you've got to be able to find a way to find your advantage. And the way that you do that is that you adjust the consensus ranks, which we're going to talk through some tiers and stuff in a second, in a way that will benefit to your league. And so you gave some of those examples, and we're going to go through a mock draft and kind of set that up a little bit. But make sure you head over to your league site, because they're all so vastly different. And you have to adjust your ranks accordingly.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, agreed. So, Dale, maybe you can start us off on this one, touch us off on this one, really. Just curious about strategies-wise. There are a lot of different strategies out there that you'll hear. So whether you go running back in the first 2 rounds, or running back wide receiver, or wide receiver, or zero running back, we don't take a running back till later, zero wide receiver, or even value-based drafting, which is a little bit more complex for people that haven't been playing fantasy football. But is there anything in particular? Now, every draft is different, as John said earlier. Like, every draft is going to be different, so you're going to be looking at different guys on the board when it comes to you. But is there any strategy that you always try to do, or is there any strategy on that list that you're like, I'll never do that no matter what?
This is going to be kind of a easy question for me. I mean, value-based drafting is by far, I mean, before you get into your draft, depending, how serious you are, with it, you're going to go value-based drafting 9 times out of 10, just because even if you have, if you have the first, second, third pick, maybe the fourth pick, your pre-selected, running backs that you're going to get. But beyond that, you're drafting solely on value 9 times out of 10, maybe even 10 times out of 10 for me. So, yeah, that's my strategy going to it almost every time. The one running back, wide receiver, those strategies, I don't like to stick to that because you don't know who's going to fall to you. And if you have that predetermined strategy already before you even go into the draft, and, you're saying, I'm going to go wide receiver, but, maybe Christian McCaffrey's available at 5 for some weird reason. Why not get the best player available that's going to help you win? Again, going back to those, first 2 rounds that are so important, you really want to go for the value there for sure.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And value-based drafting, just very, super quickly for those of you that haven't heard what it is, basically it's just looking at the value of a specific player.
Yeah.
So really, and I use the Gronk situation from years back, when Gronk was just leaps and bounds ahead of every other tight end in the league. And so his value was higher because his average points per game were that much higher than everybody else in the league. And so therefore he was a better pick than, even maybe a top flight wide receiver, because those wide receivers, even though the points are higher, it's not like a huge disparity between the top guy and the 10th guy. And so there's a little bit more value when you're drafting a guy like Gronk as opposed to when you're drafting the 4th wide receiver, even though if he's going to end up scoring more points than Gronk overall, there's a bigger difference between him and the average person, which is why you go with a guy like Gronk in that situation. So that's the idea of value-based drafting. It's obviously a lot more complex than that, but that's the basic idea behind it.
Right. I mean, I suggest, before going to your draft, if you're serious about the fantasy football now, going running back, wide receiver, I think that's more of a kind of a plain Jane approach to coming into your fantasy draft. But if you really want to get into it and you really want to get serious and you want to win, go, find some podcasts, find some websites that do rankings, that do consensus rankings, start looking at them and figure out, okay, where is that 7th or 8th, I have the 8th pick in the draft, where are those guys falling and where, where's the value at, number 8, and then coming back around to whatever it is, number 4, 3, or 5, and, kind of planning your draft out that way, as opposed to saying, I've heard, running back is, the way to go. My friend won a league going running back last year, and I'm going to do that too. And it's like, you don't know who's going to be available. And, if somebody like Joe Mixon is available, that's great. He's a good player. But if DeAndre Hopkins is there instead, you throw your strategy away and go with the best player, and especially in those first couple rounds.
Yep. All right. And now one thing you touched upon, John, which I just want to touch upon just very quickly before we start the mock draft, and then we'll get right into it, is the tier system. Now, on ESPN, if you're looking at ESPN, and I think Yahoo as well, they don't have tiers set up on their consensus rankings. And so I think it's something that you guys do that I know, there's a decent amount of people out there that do it, but you guys are the only people that I, follow and listen to that really do it and stick with it as much as you do. I think it's super helpful for someone that's drafting, especially when you don't know every little thing about every single player. Could you just go into a little bit more in depth as to what the tiers look like?
Yeah, sure. And if you head over to our website, eatsleepfantasy.com, we have these rankings available. They are up on there. So just sign up for, you can do the free membership and see our rankings, or you can do our platinum membership for $20 and you get our entire draft kit, everything, whatever. But those options are there. But you can just go check out our rankings. And the idea is very simple. It's very easy to look at somebody that is the 5th running back or the 6th running back, and it seems like they're super close. So, for example, I have James Conner. These are my own individual half-point PPR rankings. I have James Conner, number 5, and I have Le'Veon Bell as the 6th running back. Now, those are in 2 different tiers. I have James Conner in the exact same tier as the top guys. I'm much higher on James Conner than most people. But just because James Conner, let's say he has gone, the top 5 running backs are off the board, that does not mean that I go with the next available running back, because that is where I'm going to insert my top wide receiver tier of DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams. It's a very small tier at the top. And so what this is going to allow you to do when you do tiered-based rankings is to hold these premium or elite positions across from each other. This is the exact same way that NFL teams set up their draft boards going into the NFL draft. And so what it does is it allows you to look at the different positions and their value in light and against each other. So it's not just, well, my next running back is this. Well, not necessarily. Who's the next best player? And so whenever you do that, you can even add in, well, Travis Kelce, who you brought up a while ago as the number 1 tight end. However, he is in a tier with 2 other guys that finished very, very close to him last year, and with George Kittle, and also, the all-time reception leader in a single season, Zach Ertz, at the tight end position. So it just helps you see. And one of my favorite things to do, I'm going to cut myself off, is to get the last guy in those tiers. And that's kind of a mix between tiered rankings and value-based drafting. Is you always want to be towards the end of the tier. You never want to start the tier. And if you keep doing that all the way down your draft, you are going to have a loaded roster. And we've done all the work for you. So just head over to our website. You can just download that off the site. No big deal. It'll help you out a lot.
Right. And it's really helpful, like for me, who I know a decent amount about fantasy football, I've been playing for years, but even still, sometimes I get into like the 4th, 5th, 6th round, and I'm kind of like, I like this wide receiver, and I kind of like this one too, but like, how do they compare to each other? And you can look at those tiers and say, okay, well, this guy's in the same tier as, say I like, I don't know, I don't even know, some random, I don't know, pick anyone, pick a guy like Joe Mixon, let's say in the 2nd or 3rd round, right? Okay, I have Joe Mixon, I like him, but there's in his tier, there's 4 other running backs available in his same tier that are similar to Joe Mixon that are still on the board. And I'm saying, okay, well, I have, I'm 6 picks away from my next pick. Well, maybe I say, all right, I'd like Joe Mixon, but there's 4 other guys in that tier. Chances are one of them is going to come back to me if I like, a wide receiver in a higher tier better. And so, that kind of gives you an idea of what you're looking at. And I like that a lot. And that, for me at least, just helps a lot when I'm drafting. So it's a very useful tool.
Right. And that's the thing. You'll get tiers for a lot of the top guys on a lot of sites. The last update that I sent to Dale yesterday had 334 players in it. So if you're one of those deep leagues and you get to round like 12, 13, 14, and you don't know what the hell's going on, we overkilled it a little.
Hey, man, it's helpful. It's helpful. We appreciate it. So, all right, so let's get into this mock draft. And we're not going to do a full mock draft, obviously. We're going to go through, somewhere between 6 and 10 rounds, just to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at. We're going to randomize the draft order so we end up somewhere. But Dale, let's randomize it until we end up somewhere in the middle, instead, so we're not drafting, in that top 5. We already know who the top 4 or 5 players off the board are going to be. So let's try to get to, like, I don't know, 6 or 7 or something like that.
Sure. All right, let's do it. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, there it is. I'm excited.
Me too.
I want to argue.
All right. We're going to do 12 teams. I'm going to randomize it. Let's see.
Let's do half.
Let's do
7th is good.
Okay.
Let's do half PPR.
Half PPR, which is points per reception for those that don't know. So every time somebody gets a catch, they get a half a point bonus, basically. 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex, meaning wide receiver or running back in that position. Is that good with you guys?
Yeah, so this is going to be kind of your standard league once you set it up on whatever site that you're at. If you don't customize it, it's going to set you up with something very similar to this. Now, I strongly recommend if you're starting a league or you don't already have league formats to add an additional flex or two. It makes it more fun, makes it a little bit, the league won't be as top heavy. And then two, PPR or half point PPR is much more entertaining. It just provides more points throughout the game and makes the game more entertaining. So, and again, PPR, points per reception, you can classify that however you want. So.
Sure. Okay, so we started it off. We are the 7th position, and you guys feel free to stop me or tell me to get going anytime. But we have, since we are the 7th pick, we had 6 picks before us. They were all running backs. Not a huge surprise. Usually there's at least 1 or 2 wide receivers in there. Like John was talking about, those top-tier wide receivers usually sneak in there in the first 6 picks. But we had Barkley, McCaffrey, Kamara, Zeke, Le'Veon Bell, and Nick Chubb all going 1 through 6. I don't have a huge issue with how the computer picked those, but we are facing a few pretty good options here. If you're going to go running back, we're looking at either David Johnson. Let's see. I'm sorry. Let me just scroll down here. Looking at like David Johnson or James Conner. If we're going wide receivers, we're looking at the top guys like DeAndre Hopkins and Davante Adams.
So I was going to say, John, you have Connor obviously a lot higher than most people. So I'm assuming, are going to say Connor here, right?
I have David Johnson right above him. So in my rankings, I have David Johnson 4, and I have James Conner 5. I'm a huge fan of both of those guys because both of those guys could lead the NFL in touches. And both of those guys will be close to almost leading in receptions. David Johnson with the new offense, there's a little bit more of a question mark there. And again, this first pick, the value of each decision that you make descends greatly as you continue through this. So this is going to determine what we do next. And again, as you said, quarterbacks, I don't care if Patrick Mahomes is available. They're so deep there. Please wait on quarterback. And if you're Travis Kelce's mom, that's wonderful. Please wait till at least the second round, just because, again, the value early on in drafts is running back and wide receiver. But personally here, I would choose David Johnson, but I would be fine with either David Johnson or James Conner here.
What are you thinking, Dale?
Yeah, I'm pretty big on David Johnson myself this year. So if I'm picking at the 7th spot, I'm really, really happy with David Johnson. John didn't really talk about DeAndre Hopkins. I think he's a pretty good value at 7 as well. But David Johnson's where it's at.
Yeah, no, I mean, me too. Like in a different situation, I think Hopkins would be a no-brainer here. But when you have David Johnson on the board, I think you have to take him over Hopkins.
Okay. All right, so we took David Johnson as our first pick. A couple wide receivers off the board right after, including Julio Jones was the first one, then DeAndre Hopkins, Davante Adams, of course. A couple running backs mixed in, James Conner and Joe Mixon. Tyreek Hill was taken, so was Michael Thomas. So we are back on the clock. We are picking at 2-6, which is second round, 6th pick. And,
hey, quick! I'm going to just interrupt you just for a second. The person who had the 11th pick drafted Connor, and then in the second round drafted Juju. So obviously you got players from the same team going there. How do you feel about that?
If it's a top offense, it's great. And so the offenses that I don't mind doing that with, obviously you have the Packers are going to be up there, the Chiefs, the Rams, the Steelers, and,
Saints.
Who else am I missing in that? Saints. Yeah, and I'd probably another team that's going to be close up there is going to be the Minnesota Vikings, I believe. And so with certain teams, if it's a great offense, that's wonderful. If it's a bad offense, then absolutely not. And also, I'll probably throw the Bucs up there with wide receivers, not running back. They are going to throw the ball like crazy. I usually don't like having 2 pass catchers from the same team. However, I think the Bucs are going to be a weird exception this year. Anyway, we'll get to that once we get further down.
No, and I think 110 as well is a great example of what you were talking about, Dale, where you're not worried about how you're going to do it. At 110, Hopkins is available. The guy takes Hopkins on the way back. He takes Michael Thomas. So, you end up with 2 wide receivers, but, you're getting 2 legitimately fantastic wide receivers. And so, maybe you wouldn't go into the draft thinking wide receiver, but if Hopkins is staring you in the face there at 10, it's a really solid pick. And then again, Thomas is there, and there's no way there's any running back that's better than Michael Thomas in that situation. So, that to me is a no-brainer pick there.
Yep. All right, so now we are looking. We got a running back the first round. We are looking. Oh, I do want to say one thing really quick for those that aren't seasoned fantasy football players. I know a lot of people talk about bye weeks. Don't get too caught up in looking at bye weeks that early. I know David Johnson has a bye week 12, and then if we get somebody like Dalvin Cook, which again that's another guy I'm pretty high on, he also has a bye week 12. But I'm not really too concerned with that. I mean, we haven't even started the season yet, and your team is just going to change over time. Who knows what's going to happen with these players, or if you get a good trade offer. Don't sacrifice drafting a good player because of especially late season bye like week 12. I just wanted to put that in there. So we have guys like I mentioned, Dalvin Cook, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, even the high tier tight ends, Travis Kelce, George Kittle are there. And the running backs here, and I can kind of give my spiel about the running back 2 this year, but I'll let you guys go and I'll add in a little bit.
Yeah, so and here's the thing. So we're in the second round. All quarterbacks are still there. We're not touching that position. All tight ends are still there. Travis Kelce is somewhat of an option here. However, because we're in the middle of the round, you don't have to worry too much about crazy runs. Let's say you're picking one first, second, or third spot, or 10, 11, 12 spot. That's a little bit different because you're going to have 20-plus picks in between your picks. So that one you have to plan a little bit. However, when you're in the middle of the round, you have a lot more flexibility because you don't have to sweat it. There's going to be 10 to 14 picks between you each time, and that's okay. So you can kind of predict who's going to be there and who's not. So I still want to stay running back or wide receiver. But, and Dale, this is a question for you. I love alternating early on to give myself the flexibility later on to get best player available. Yeah. If you start going, let's say you go running back first round, running back second round, running back third round, which a lot of people love to do. Yeah. Let's say a great running back comes back in the fourth round. Do you just keep loading up and just completely ignore the wide receiver position? It's not a bad strategy. A lot of people call zero RB, where you just go every position besides running back and you load up with rookies late. That's a fine thing. However, I truly do believe that you don't want to lock yourself into a spot in a future round where you have to say, man, I love this guy and that would be a great pick, but I can't because of what I did before. Yeah. So in this situation, there are a lot of wide receivers that are available. Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, Antonio Brown is there, and Stefon Diggs, who I'm really, really high on. But for me personally, it's going to come down to these two guys, Mike Evans and Antonio Brown.
Yes, I really like Mike Evans here. And just to go back to what you were saying, John, trying to have a balanced roster. I don't go into the draft thinking I'm going for a balanced roster. Again, I'm looking at the value. But in the back of my head, every single draft I've done, you always kind of have to think like, I don't want to get too heavy on running back, because exactly what you said. You're going to end up, in the fourth round and needing a wide receiver when, maybe there's still value other places. So absolutely, I 100% agree with you.
Now, I know somebody's cussing me right now because I talked about minimizing risk and then I said Antonio Brown. So I want to make sure that I just help you understand why I'm saying what I am saying, okay? For example, Antonio Brown is a nutcase, but he's also the best wide receiver in football, or at least top 3. Okay, his average draft position, or ADP is what we call it a lot of times, was going super, super early. He was going in the first round of almost all drafts over the summer. And then the craziness with the frostbite and the helmet and all that stuff's come out. Well, guess what? We are now on the dark side of the moon with those things. He has reported back to Raiders camp. He has agreed to give away his old damn helmet. He's still trying to find a new one. But Antonio Brown is going to be there because he has $30 million guaranteed, which means if he does choose to walk away, he loses all $30 million. If he just shows up, he gets all of that money. So he will show up. And so, again, this is a value where he is at, where it's like you have an additional first-round pick, because his draft position right now he is going right at this spot, kind of at the mid to late second round. That is going to start to climb now. So if you're drafting this week, that's where he's going to be. I guarantee you, if we jump forward 3 weeks, whenever almost everybody's drafting, he is going to be going in the first or second pick in the second round. So that's kind of where I would lean. If you are a person that wants to stay completely away from this guy, I would go Mike Evans. So I'm happy with either of those two guys.
Yep. And I want to just jump on this really quick. We were talking about wide receivers, not necessarily because we're trying to balance our roster already, although that is, like I said, in the back of my head. But these running backs that are available later, the next 2 rounds, the next 3 rounds, has immense value. I mean, we're talking about, 10, 15, 20 picks from now. You're still going to get guys like Devonta Freeman, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Mark Ingram, David Montgomery, Sony Michel, even James White later. So we're not even looking at running back right now, especially that we got a top tier in David Johnson. I think it's pretty obvious that we're going wide receiver. I personally would pick Mike Evans here. Maybe let Pat, maybe let Pat decide. It's his show.
You know what? As crazy as it sounds, I think I'd prefer Antonio Brown, because I just hate Mike Evans and I hate Jameis Winston, and I just can't stand those guys. And I know, every time I've had Mike Evans on my team before, and I just feel like every time I have him on my team, he sucks, and I just can't. I'm just he'll go 3 weeks. He's like Deshaun Jackson. He'll go 3 weeks with 4, 3, 2, and then he'll have 25, and I'm like, right. I can't stand it. And so and so the biggest thing that worries me about Antonio Brown, honestly, is Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper is a guy who struggled to catch the ball in Oakland and struggled to find himself in that offense, and then goes to Dallas and all of a sudden is the best receiver in football. I don't get it. And so maybe it has something to do with the offense and with David Carr and with what they're doing over there. But I mean, it's Antonio Brown, and like John said, if he's up to what he was. I mean, he had a bad year last year, and he was still what, a top 20 wide receiver? I mean, to me, Brown is the pick here.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said that he had a bad year last year. He finishes the number 5 wide receiver.
Right. Oh yeah.
He is fit.
Okay.
These are the past 6 years: 5th wide receiver, 2nd, 1st, 3rd.
Yeah. And don't forget, he's coming from an offense with his wide receiver 2 basically getting 10, 15 targets a game along with him. He's not going to have that in Oakland.
Right.
He's going to eat. I think pound for pound, the best wide receiver in football right now. Things just have to go right for him this year with this offense. So, all right, I'm drafting Antonio Brown at 2-6, second round, 6th pick. After that, guys like Damian Williams, Travis Kelce, George Kittle were taken. Later in the 3rd round, Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, David Montgomery, the rookie out of Chicago. Patrick Mahomes was the first quarterback taken in the middle of the 3rd. A little too early, I think a round too early for my quarterback. If a top tier quarterback, I think it's a round too early for me. And then Aaron Jones was taken right before. So we have David Johnson, Antonio Brown, super balanced. We can go either direction. So really looking at value here. What do you guys think? We have running backs like Kerryon Johnson, Melvin Gordon. Pretty fall for Melvin Gordon. We'll see.
Yeah.
How the holdout situation works out. But Marlon Mack, then Amari Cooper, who Pat just mentioned, Adam Thielen. Going back to the tight ends, a top tier tight end, Zach Ertz. And then we have quarterbacks, but we're not even going to go through the quarterbacks right now.
Yeah, we're not touching quarterbacks. There's so many quarterbacks. There's so much depth here. Now, my favorite player in this one, and I don't think it's too close, is Kerryon Johnson, which I am a huge Kerryon guy. They went ahead and let go Theo Riddick. He is going to be, and we're a half-point PPR. This is a guy that's going to get 70 targets to 70 catches. I really think he could be maybe north of that. He is definitely my guy. Now, Melvin Gordon, and again, staying with that concept, he is a guy we don't know about right now. And you're going to have to be willing to throw away your 3rd round pick for a guy who could be a top 10 running back. For me, I'm still saying no. What do you think, Pat? How do you feel towards the Melvin Gordon situation? Do you feel like you have a handle on this guy, or?
No, I feel the same way. I mean, I just don't, especially after Bell last year. I just feel like there's no impetus for him to actually come and play, and he could just sit out and not play. And I just think, and I said this all year, and this is kind of not fantasy related, but I said it all year last year. Pittsburgh was dumb. They should have traded Bell the second now a little bit different because it was the franchise tender, I believe. But the second he said, I'm going to hold out, they should have traded him. And I feel the same way about Gordon. It's like, what are you doing? Either pay the guy or trade him. It's not worth it. It's not worth it because he's going to sit on your bench and then he's gone next year. It's like you're dumb for doing it. But if the Chargers are going to let him sit there and not move him, now you're stuck with Melvin Gordon, and we've seen it work. And now whether we know how it works out with Bell or not, we don't know if Bell's going to get, if Bell's going to play really well this year. We have no idea. But he got his money. And so there's no reason to think that Gordon wouldn't say, screw it, I'll sit out too, and I'll get my money next year, just like Bell did. And so to me, I don't love Melvin Gordon here. I might take a shot at him in the 4th round, but the 3rd round to me is a little bit too early still. I have my eye on another running back, not in this round, but I have my eye on another running back maybe coming back in the 4th round. That's Mark Ingram. I just feel like that offense is going to run the ball on every single play. And he's the main running back.
And I love that. I love what you said there. Like, I have my eye on Mark Ingram, and let's say you love Mark Ingram, but you can go early and reach for a guy, but you don't have to go nuts, right? Because you can still get Mark Ingram. There's 10 running backs that are still on the board ranked ahead of them. We're using Fantasy Pros Draft Simulator, and it shows you the consensus ranks. Now, wherever you are drafting, let's say it's ESPN or NFL or whatever, draft off of their rankings so that you can see what everybody else says and have your rankings off to the side or our rankings from EatSleepFantasy.com. And so you don't want to adjust the rankings on the side. A lot of features have that. Do not do that. Keep it to where it's the site's default rankings, because basically that gives you a cheat sheet on what the majority of your league is drafting from. So it lets you know what they're thinking as well. So now, is there a chance we could lose Mark Ingram here and he's not there in the 4th round? Possibly. But, Pat, like you said, let's develop a little bit of a plan here looking forward. So I like Kerryon Johnson here. You like Mark Ingram in the next round. Do we want to go running back here, or would we prefer to grab one of these top 10 wide receivers that are left and stay with the balanced roster? So this is where we got to kind of plan it. So the question would be, would we prefer Kerryon Johnson and Mark Ingram, or would we prefer Adam Thielen and Mark Ingram? Which one's going to make our roster better? I'll go to Dale for this one because I know you're a Thielen guy.
I am a Thielen guy, yeah, and I would absolutely say if we're going wide receiver here, which I think is a pretty smart idea, I'm going Adam Thielen and hoping for Mark Ingram. I mean, even if not Mark Ingram, like I mentioned, I mean, Sony Michel for me is the same tier, and it's like, we have a good shot at getting one of 4 pretty good guys in the same tier coming back. So absolutely, we're not thinking about running back here, and we're looking at Adam Thielen, in my opinion.
Okay.
All right, let's do it.
Cool. That was hold on.
You have to hit the button that says draft player, Dale.
He wasn't in there. Okay. All right, so we got Adam Thielen. After that, Chris Carson.
Oh, Mark Ingram went.
Of
Mark
course
Ingram
he
did go early. Yep.
And Sony Michel went.
That's funny. Okay, and Derrick Henry.
Wow.
You know what didn't happen? Almost no wide receivers went.
Yep.
This is going to happen, and this is why you mock draft. So let's just say you are the biggest Mark Ingram fan, and you're just like, if I don't get this guy on my team, I'm just going to be pissed. You go through these mock drafts, and you try it out. This is a trial. We're not playing with this team. And so now we know, man, if I want to be 100% guaranteed to get Mark Ingram, I've got to take him in the 3rd.
Right.
Or trade for him later on. So definitely some things that can happen. If you are in the middle of a draft and somebody picks the guy that you're in love with, what you want to do is, one, put on your poker face. And what I do, I'm an asshole. I'm just going to be honest. I don't know if I can cuss on this show, but whatever.
I mean, something like that is okay.
You can edit that for sure. My apologies.
That's quite all right. We'll stay away from the hard stuff. That's all.
And this gets into kind of your strategy. I'm going to be like, man, Mark Ingram, really? Like, what do you think about him? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to start working that trade right then and there. Well, all right, cool. Would you be interested in trading him and try to get some of that stuff worked out, whether that's in the chat or private DM, whatever? Hopefully it's a live draft. But we went wide receiver, and there's still some stud wide receivers there. So do we want to go with, we've got two of the Rams wide receivers, Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods, which I love both those guys. You said earlier that you didn't like Mike Evans because he's a boomer bust type of a guy. Robert Woods was the safest and most predictable wide receiver last year with double-digit games. So if you are looking for consistent week in and week out, will never lose you a game, Robert Woods is there. Chris Godwin as well. But there are still some running backs. Devontae Freeman, Josh Jacobs, Phillip Lindsay, James White. So, Pat, let's go to you, man. Who are some guys that stand out to you here?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's probably going to be one of the top running backs, only because the hard thing for me is that at this point we're at 4-6. We don't draft again until 5-7, and so I look at that and I say, okay, at that point these top running backs are going to be gone. We're looking at a running back 2 situation, our second starting running back. I want to have a guy that's in the same tier with Freeman and Jacobs, and not, I don't want to end up with Latavius Murray as my number 2 running back. You know what I mean? And so that, to me, even though you want to draft the best player available, and that might not be Freeman or Jacobs here, it might be a guy like Cooks or Woods, like you said. To me, I just think that, you have to go after one of these running backs at this point, because, otherwise your team is going to be skewed to your wide receiver. Now, maybe you say, okay, Cooks and Woods are that much better than Freeman or Jacobs. And if that's the case, and you don't like either of those players, well, then you say, okay, fine, I'll live with one of those other running backs, and my wide receiving core will be just completely stacked. And if I have to trade for a running back later, I will.
Yeah. I mean, my thing here is, if we did a mock draft 5 more times, I don't think Mark Ingram will go as early as 4-3. And you got to kind of, and I don't know how intelligent this the simulator is, but when you're looking at the end of the 3rd round, 4 running backs taken at the end of the 3rd round, that after the couple running backs were taken, that kind of starts a domino effect, and especially in the leagues when you're drafting with actual people, they're looking at running back taken, and then people start panicking like, oh crap, I got to take a running back. Same thing goes for quarterbacks. If you watch in your leagues and your mock drafts with other people, when a quarterback is taken a couple times in a row, when 1, 2, 3 quarterbacks are taken in that same round, people start going crazy, and it's a domino effect, and they start reaching for quarterbacks when they normally wouldn't. Yep. Just last month when we were in Dallas, John, we were drafting 4 boards at the same time. It was crazy how different they were, and it was all depending on when these quarterback runs hit. Sometimes the quarterback runs would hit in the 6th round. Everybody would draft a quarterback in the 6th round. Sometimes you would get those same quarterbacks in the 12th round. It was really weird how it was acting up. And so the same exact thing happened here with the running backs. I wouldn't count on, don't take that, hey, we got to definitely always reach for Mark Ingram in the 3rd. I get what John was saying. I'm just trying to reiterate it. If you're looking at this mock draft, yes, and you really want Mark Ingram, that's your thinking, that you got to get him a little bit early. But, it's probably not going to happen very often unless you see more of these running back runs. So,
yep.
And that's where I think the volume that you're doing is important, right? If you do one mock draft and you're like, oh, well, that's how that went, Mark Ingram, I have to take him in the 3rd round. Well, then you do 10 more mock drafts and Mark Ingram goes in the 4th or 5th round in every single one of them. Well, you say, well, okay, well, in the majority of them, he's going in the 4th or 5th round, so I don't need to reach for him in the 3rd round. And so, and he could go in the 3rd round in your draft. You don't know, but it's just about doing as many mock drafts as you can to get a feel for what you think might actually happen.
Yep. And you're always going to get a guy who right before the draft, he reads something from a beat writer in Baltimore talking about Mark Ingram is, going to be the best running back in football. And, you get excited and people reach and stuff like that. So, and you're going to have those guys. But going back to the draft, Pat, I agree with you. I think Freeman or the rookie Josh Jacobs out of Oakland is definitely the way to go for me. John, do you agree?
Yeah, I love it, man. And so, like, again, either one of these two guys is going to be huge. Now, the question is volume over offense. The Atlanta offense is much, much better. Okay, so they're near the top in scoring and yards all the time. However, they don't like to stay with a single running back. They love to do timeshares. Oakland, we already have a player for Oakland, and we talked about how we don't want to partner up two skill players on a bad offense. But Josh Jacobs is a guy that could be in competition for most touches in the NFL. So either one of these aren't bad. If we want to diversify and spread out our risk, I would suggest Devontae Freeman. But if we want to stay for it's a half-point PPR, this guy's going to have a lot of catches in that offense. Check down. I mean, literally 300 rushing attempts. If he doesn't get that, it's going to be a disappointment. So, yeah, either of those two guys.
Pat, make the call.
Me make the call? I was going to tell you to make the call.
We're like the United Nations over here, man.
I'll go Freeman if it's up to me.
All right, do it.
So through the first 4 picks, we have 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers.
I would have gone Jacobs myself, but
Yeah, I love that he waited until he clicked the button.
So we have David Johnson, Devonta Freeman, Antonio Brown, and Adam Thielen. Going forward, now this is where we start kind of looking at. We have a pretty balanced roster. Now, where are we maybe a little weaker in? That's how I kind of determine where to draft here. Do we need to get a little bit stronger on running backs? I don't think so. I think we're really, really strong with David Johnson and Freeman. Wide receivers are Brown and Thielen. Brown is a little bit of a risk.
Roster, man.
It's a very solid roster so far. I'm thinking we're leaning a little bit towards wide receiver, depending on what's available. And I do want to add, the 5th round is really where I start looking at top-tier quarterbacks. If a top-tier quarterback, and by top-tier, I mean Mahomes, Watson, or Andrew Luck for me personally, if they're available anywhere between the mid-5th and the late 5th, I start thinking about quarterbacks. But
Andrew Luck scares the crap out of me, man. With that high ankle thing, what the hell's going on?
Yeah,
his ADP is going to drop. He's going as the 4th quarterback right now. That is going to be a major issue. And here's the thing. Let me just say this about quarterbacks. We're in a 12-team league, okay? If every team drafts 2 quarterbacks, which I don't usually recommend, that's 24 quarterbacks, which means every single Sunday, besides bye weeks, there are going to be, my math is not my strong suit, 8 available quarterbacks on the waiver wire. So, having said that, wait on quarterbacks. Now, if Patrick Mahomes falls to the 5th round, then I'm cool with it. Outside of that, there's not that much of a difference if you look at points per game last year between guys like if you look at guys like Cam Newton, Carson Wentz, Russell Wilson, all these guys finished near the top of the league. Cam Newton got injured, and that hurt a lot. But there's not a giant point gap per game between them and the bottom guys. So I don't mind waiting on quarterback, but if there's a guy that you got to have, I mean, you got to go get him. But I'm still staying the hell away here.
Yeah.
I always wait on quarterback.
I do too. Deshaun Watson, his little profile picture on this simulator, it looks like he's staring at me. But anyways, I will refrain. Right after we selected Freeman, another tight end, O.J. Howard, then Robert Woods, A.J. Green, Josh Jacobs was taken. Crazy wide receiver run over the next 8 picks.
All wide receivers except for, since we picked all wide receivers except for O.J. Howard and Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So tons of wide receivers going off the board.
Mike Williams, Cooper Kupp, Tyler Lockett, Will Fuller. So we're looking at 5th round, 7th pick. We have a balanced roster. We're kind of we can go anywhere we want, really. The wide receivers, I'd like the tier that we're at because there's the 4 guys. Really, I'm not going to count Alshon Jeffrey, but Tyler Boyd, Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore. They're all kind of grouped together for me. I like all those guys. And then looking at the running backs, Phillip Lindsay, James White. It's not really looking too sexy on the running back side, but
no, it is not.
What are you guys thinking? Or I feel the same way about tight ends as John does about quarterbacks.
Yeah,
if I'm not getting the top 3, maybe even top 4, including O.J. Howard, I'm waiting a little bit longer.
I am a little different with one player, and that is Evan Ingram. I have him. I've gotten pretty close to putting him in my top tier of tight end rankings. I have him 4th, and so I have him almost in a tier of his own because I think he's closer to Zach Ertz than he is to anybody else, O.J. Howard, Hunter Henry. He is one of those guys that could lead the position in receptions this year. They have nothing else to throw to, and they are a check down offense. There's no wide receivers. I mean, it's going to be Saquon and the Evan Ingram show. So I do like Evan Ingram here, and I don't mind that in the 5th round, but it's not something that you have to jump out on. And here's the deal. Here are the times that I am willing to go quarterback or tight end earlier is if you're playing with not a lot of flex positions, which in this mock we do not, or you're playing in a 10-team league. Because if you are playing with fewer teams, that means the talent, the waiver wire and all those things, it's going to be a top-heavy league. You don't need depth if you are in a 10-person league or a small bench league or a lower starters league. The more positions you add, the more depth you need. The fewer you have or the teams you take away, it's all about that top end. So something to keep in mind there. Hopefully I made it more confusing for everybody.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you what, I don't mind the Ingram pick here. I do agree with you. It's interesting, though, for me, I feel the exact opposite way about Tyler Boyd. I would feel a lot better about Tyler Boyd if A.J. Green were healthy. I just feel like last year when Green was out, Boyd struggled. And when Green was playing, Boyd was good because he was the number 2 option. I don't know if he's a number 1 wide receiver. And so the beginning of this year, until A.J. Green comes back, whenever that is, he's going to be that number 1 option. He's going to be really keyed on, and maybe double covered. I don't feel confident that Tyler Boyd can beat that double coverage. And so I don't love Tyler Boyd in this spot. Now, if you tell me that you love, Calvin Ridley or DJ Moore in this spot over Evan Ingram, I'd be fine with it. I'd go with that. But I think that Ingram is a legitimate shot here, and for me, certainly over Tyler Boyd, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like both those plays, man. I do like Tyler Boyd, and I love their offense that they have coming now. Tyler Boyd finishes the wide receiver 15 last year, but what people keep saying on Twitter, and I hear in these conversations, it does not help him that A.J. Green was gone. He had a strong sample size with A.J. Green and without him last year. He did better with him. It's not addition by subtraction. He might get more targets. However, as you said, if the defenses can key on him, that is not what he needs, especially coming out of the slot. So me personally, I know Dell's going to disagree with me. I would take Evan Ingram here, but I'm like turning into a fanboy of Evan Ingram. So I can completely understand if you want to go the other way.
No, I'm okay. I mean, look, I trust your judgment. I don't agree with your ranking, but that doesn't mean it's a bad play here. To be honest, I mean, Tyler Boyd, Calvin Ridley, I mean, they don't really do anything for me. So I don't have a strong argument against it. So you got me on this round. If you want Evan Ingram, I'll draft him.
All right, let's do it.
All right. Super balanced now. David Johnson, Devonta Freeman, Antonio Brown, Adam Thielen, Evan Ingram. Now we can really do whatever we want here.
Yep.
Now what I'm thinking now is we can do with what a lot of guys, in an old league that I used to play in that I don't no longer play in anymore. They would at this point draft a quarterback, and then another either running back or wide receiver, and then a defense, and then a kicker, and they'd be like, "Hey, my entire starting roster is all set." I'm like, you idiots. Like,
yes, don't do that. And we're starting to see that already. Like, just in this mock draft, there's 4 quarterbacks taken in the last 5 picks because there is that mentality, and this is so overwhelming. Well, now they're just bench players, not that big of a deal. And the common fantasy football player doesn't think about injuries, suspensions, bye weeks, things like that happen. Running backs are always injured. So if you are at the spot where you're like, man, I feel really good about my team, go after running back depth. And there are some strong plays here. Now, if you wanted to go quarterback here with a guy like Aaron Rodgers, Cam Newton, Matt Ryan, whatever, that's fine. But again, if we look, there's been how many quarterbacks gone? About 6 quarterbacks gone total. That means there's 6 teams out there that don't have a quarterback. Half the teams have a quarterback. So there's going to be guys there. I love the running back position here. I think that there are some strong plays. James White, who finishes a top 10 running back last year were in a half-point PPR. I really like Lamar Miller. And, shoot, Tevin Coleman, people stayed away from San Francisco running backs because there was 3 of them. Well, guess what? Now there's 2. And if you combine all the running back yards and fantasy points that San Francisco RBs had, it was the 5th most per team last year. So it's going to be Matt Breida and Tevin Coleman. I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those 2 guys because Shanahan offenses always put up huge points at the running back position. So there's a lot of options there. I love the running back spot right here, though. That's what I would recommend.
Okay. I mean, I'm obviously a Patriots guy. This is a Patriots podcast, but James White, for me, you look at the beginning of the season especially. Now, Ben Watson's going to be suspended. Who knows when Josh Gordon's going to be back, if Demaryius Thomas is back. You got, potentially 2 rookie wide receivers that are playing. Edelman's going to be coming off his thumb injury. A lot of questions. The only guy that doesn't have questions is James White, and they threw to him non-stop at the beginning of the season, and I just feel like he's going to get a ridiculous amount of targets, especially at the beginning of the year, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him be, a top 5 to 10 running back in a half-point PPR league halfway through the season. Now, I don't think he can last the full year with that workload, so he could be a guy that you try to ship off, say week 7, 8, something like that, where he's been really good, and you say, you know what, I don't think he can hold up all year long. And I think the Patriots kind of show you they don't think that either because they really pulled off of him at the end of the year. But I think that he could be a guy that could win a few games for you at least early in the season.
Yep.
Cool.
Dale, come on, man, be the breaker of chains. Let's go, buddy.
I am going with James White here.
Look at this.
Yeah, I like James White. I really liked him last season too, and he did me well. Exactly to the points that Pat mentioned. I'm going James White. I agree.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so we went James White. A couple more quarterbacks off the board: Matt Ryan, Aaron Rodgers, and Cam Newton. D.D. Westbrook. That's one of my, I guess, mid-round guys that I really, really like, and he was just taken right before our pick. Tevin Coleman, who was mentioned, Darius Geis, and Austin Eckler. Actually, me and John just had a podcast debating Austin Eckler and Darius Geis. That's pretty interesting. So we are looking at – we have our roster filled besides quarterback. We still a ton of quarterbacks left. So I don't really think it's worth even mentioning because the top-tier guys are obviously gone. And so basically it's all just a crapshoot there from 8 to 20. So we're not really going to deal with that. So for running backs we're looking at, Lamar Miller is still available. We just took our 3rd running back, though. But Lamar Miller, Rashad Penny, Miles Sanders, the rookie out of Philadelphia, is still there. And then we're looking at wide receivers like Jarvis Landry, Marvin Jones, Dante Pettis, Curtis Samuel, Sammy Watkins.
Well, John, you're a San Francisco guy, right? I mean, is Pettis the pick here?
No. That's a wonderful – thank you for bringing that up. Pettis, people need to pump the brakes on considerably. He has had a very, very bad camp that's only gotten worse. It started off great, and it's gotten really, really bad. So the thing about Dante Pettis is this. He's going to be a starting wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers, guaranteed to start the season. That's fine. However, the younger guys are pushing much faster than everybody thought. Deebo Samuel, 2nd-round pick out of South Carolina, and Jalen Hurd, 3rd-round pick out of Baylor. They showed out in the very first preseason game. Jalen Hurd had 2 touchdowns. Now, I don't think either one of them are going to take their job. In fact, neither one of those wide receivers have even taken snaps in the offense at that position. But the idea that Dante Pettis was going to be the clear-cut number 1 is on shaky ground right now. His ADP, however, does not necessarily reflect that. So if I am drafting a San Francisco person, I am waiting, and I am grabbing Jalen Hurds basically undrafted. I'm going to take him in the last 2 picks of every draft I'm in. I really think that guy could be special. So I'd pump the brakes on him right now at that ADP value. ADP stands for average draft position where he's going right now, 7th round. It's a little too early for me.
Okay. All right. Dale, what do you think about Landry here, Jarvis Landry?
Yeah, I actually think Jarvis Landry has a chance. And I know people are going to call me crazy, but Jarvis Landry does have a chance to be the biggest wide receiver performer fantasy-wise for the Cleveland Browns. I think he's pretty good value here, mid-7th. I do want to go back, and I know this isn't really mock draft related, and John, I just want a quick answer, yes or no. We don't have to go in depth into it. But Jalen Hurd on the 49ers, is his value solely based off of how Trent Taylor recovers from his injury, or is this totally a separate thing? Jalen Hurd is basically going to take his position if he doesn't get healthy. Is that correct?
Yes and no. He is playing multiple positions in the 49ers offense. However, Trent Taylor would be the guy that would be out there for, third and short in the middle of the field. Jalen Hurd has been the best 49ers wide receiver in goal line settings. So he's going to be a guy very similar to what we saw Mike Williams last year that might not be out there with the quote-unquote starters, but as soon as they get past the 30-yard line, he is going to be a mainstay and a target in the red zone, guaranteed, no matter who is healthy or who isn't.
Okay. Like the short answer.
All right.
Thank you. All right.
I can't do it, man. It's a problem. It's a problem. Unless my wife asks me a question, it's going to be a long answer.
All right.
She gives you that look, right? She gives you that look like, don't. No.
Yeah, I just say yes, ma'am.
So I think the value here is Lamar Miller. I do like Jarvis Landry. I think this is good value for both Jarvis Landry and Lamar Miller. But I just like Lamar Miller here a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. I'm down.
Okay. All right. We are now heading into the 8th round. Dante Pettis was taken at the end of the 7th. Again, a bunch of wide receivers: Curtis Samuel, Sterling Shepard, Larry Fitzgerald, Rashad Penny was taken right before us. So now we are in the 8th round, middle of the 8th, 8-6, and we have some interesting wide receivers. I'm sure a lot of discussion could go around about Cortland Sutton, Anthony Miller, Deshaun Jackson, which is really interesting, MVS out of Green Bay, and I don't know, the running back's dry.
Yeah. Well, I think too, one of the things about mock drafting too here is that I know we were talking a little bit about, between Miller and Landry and which one, you liked and which one you didn't like. Let's just say your second running back was Miles Sanders. Let's just say you liked, you were like, all right, I'm deciding between Lamar Miller and Miles Sanders. And then, I go from there. But now Sanders is still available and a bunch of wide receivers go off the board. And so you may say, okay, if I do that again, let's try that mock again, and let's see if I take Landry in there, that either Miller or Sanders drafts me again, and then maybe now I can get one of those guys in the 8th round instead of losing a bunch of wide receivers. Now maybe you like the guys that are in this wide receiver spot, but that's why doing the mock drafts and doing the homework pays off for you in the end, because you can kind of see where those drafts will end up. And, in general, if a guy might drop to you depending on what you're doing. So just one little quick note there, because I know a lot of wide receivers went and not a lot of running backs went there. So we could have said maybe, okay, we like one of those wide receivers at the top. We take one of those guys and not a ton of running backs go. And so we end up with a guy that we liked anyways,
Yep. Yeah, 100% agree.
So I'm loving this team, by the way.
Yeah.
I'll recap really quick. We have David Johnson, Devonta Freeman, Antonio Brown, Adam Thielen, Evan Ingram, James White, and Lamar Miller. Not bad.
Yeah, strong at running back for sure. Now I think the question for me is, it's the 8th round. I know we're saying wait on quarterback. Do we feel like Russell Wilson is worthy of a pick here, or are we still waiting for, even maybe Drew Brees in the next round or the 10th round or somewhere around there? I think at some point we have to start looking quarterback. I just think that I don't want to end up with Jameis Winston as my starting quarterback.
We'll make sure we won't do that. And I'll say this too, you brought this up a few times about players you hate. Fantasy football is supposed to be fun. And it doesn't matter even if you're playing like high stakes leagues or you're putting a bunch of money or a bad bet or something like that. Pick guys you like. There's so many fantasy players, and this is your team. Don't pick somebody you hate, because then you got to cheer for that. Almost cussed again. Sorry about that, Pat. You have to cheer for that person on Sundays. So don't do that.
And it's a good point. And I think too, even and I say hate, I don't actually hate the guy, but I as a fantasy guy, I don't like him. And I always felt that way about Doug Baldwin. And I think it was it was either last year or 2 years ago. I ended up taking him in the second round because he was the only guy available, and it was like he was clearly better than everybody else on the board. And I was just like, I really don't want to make this pick, but I was like, fine, I'll make it. And like week 3, he got hurt and was done basically for the entire year. And I was so mad all year long because I was like, I purposely never draft Doug Baldwin because I think he's inconsistent. And the 1 year I draft him, of course, he gets hurt and never plays. And it's just like, just shows me,
I wish I could see
that
his
damn
face
guy,
right
you know
now.
what I
I
mean?
can see the anger. That's great. I love Russell Wilson as a fantasy quarterback. He's never missed a game in his entire career. He's never finished outside of the top 12 quarterbacks. He has 3 top 3 quarterback finishes. And the crazy thing is he did it last year as well, but they don't throw the ball. However, he is beyond efficient. I don't see that stopping this year. He is a super safe quarterback that, we're getting in the 8th round. So if you do want to go quarterback here, I would definitely recommend Russell Wilson. He is a super safe quarterback that you can get with top 5 upside.
All right. Now, Dale, you want to sell me one of those wide receivers over Russell Wilson, or you think Wilson's the pick here?
No, I think a quarterback. I think this is about where it starts drying up, and you really do have to look for for a quarterback. I'm good with Russell Wilson or Drew Brees. I like watching the Saints. Again, we're just basically saying the same thing. I really like watching the Saints. So when if I have the opportunity to get Drew Brees, I'm going to, just because I like to root for him. So, but Russell Wilson, if that's your guy, and I think maybe he is a little bit better value. But if it was my draft, I'd say I enjoy watching Drew Brees more, and I'll watch more of his games. It makes it more fun to watch. But I'm good either way. Russell Wilson.
You know what? Let's take Brees because he's in the back, and he's so consistent. You talk about Wilson being consistent, and Brees just every single year is in the top 10. And so I think let's take Brees.
Okay, I feel good about that.
All right, so let's do one more pick here. I think we've gone pretty deep into it. I don't want to spend too much time going super deep. But as Dale said, recap the team one more time, Dale, and we'll make our final pick here.
All right, quarterback Drew Brees. Then we have David Johnson, Devontae Freeman, Antonio Brown, Adam Thielen. Our tight end is Evan Ingram. Our flex is James White, and then we have a bench player, Lamar Miller. Lamar Miller being a bench player, you can already tell. Lamar Miller is our 4th best running back. We're doing a pretty good job, I think. So,
yeah, for sure.
This last pick, Russell Wilson did last the entire round, by the way. Interesting enough, yeah. You do this mock again. 5 quarterbacks will be taken. You never know.
Right.
So
right, yeah.
So we're looking at. I'll just tell you the top guys available. Jared Cook is actually still available. I know some people like to pair their quarterbacks with receivers. But you have Jared Cook, Vance McDonald, David Njoku, Austin Hooper, which I think are all good late-round tight ends that you can grab if you're waiting on tight ends. I know we already have Evan Ingram, so I don't suggest that. But we also
What
have,
if we do – I want to pause you real quick. Since this is our last pick, Dale, can we go like super deep guys, not necessarily who's best available here, but like who are 1 or 2 guys that you're just like – I gotta have at some point, because these are going to be the questions that I think people want to know the most. And there's a few guys that I see way down this list. One of them, for me, I'll do a running back and a wide receiver. At the running back position, Devin Singletary, rookie running back out of Buffalo.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Holy freaking cow. Absolutely love this kid, and I understand the Buffalo backfield is crowded. TJ Yeldon, even though he's not great. Frank Gore, greatest all time. Then I got to throw the 49ers plug in there. Plus LaShawn McCoy. I kid you not. Devin Singletary is going to be a guy who probably won't start weeks 1, 2, and 3. But he is going to be that kind of Nick Chubb guy that once he get this starting role in an amazing rushing offense with a mobile quarterback, which helps the run game, back to our argument about Mark Ingram, this guy is going to win fantasy football leagues down the stretch. Absolutely love Devin Singletary.
I agree.
So I don't want to steal your next guy, Dale. I'll kick it over to you.
No. You go. You steal both of them, because I know I can guarantee you're not going to give my wide receiver. I guarantee it.
I felt like I already plugged Jalen Hurd. Did I plug him? I did
Yes.
plug him a little
You
bit.
did, yeah.
So I'll stay away from that one. I will take this one. Deep breath. And I hate to say it because I hate this damn offense.
Don't
But,
say Adam Humphries.
Nah. Man, dude, he had 6 targets.
Whoa.
He had
Whoa.
6 targets in the opening drive of their preseason game. Like 6 targets on one drive on a rushing offense. Absolutely love that.
Guy.
I'm just saying. So there we go.
Wait,
Yeah, why would you
Mariota
do that? Why would you
Mariota
do that?
can't throw the deep ball.
wait.
He's gotta
Wait.
check it.
Are
He's
you
gotta
really?
check it down every play?
Are you really saying Adam Humphries?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
who I was going to say. I'll say Jamison Crowder, the poor man's version of that. It's the exact same role. Target monster out of the slot. Love Jamison Crowder. Can't guard him. He creates so much space. And again, you have a quarterback that loves to check down. Adam Gase, go back to kind of the early Jarvis Landry days down in Miami, right? With those crazy targets. Well, guess who's calling the plays there for the Jets now? And he is going to be playing that Jarvis Landry role. I love guys that I can pair up that are guaranteed going to get, their 7 to 8 targets a game minimum, especially in a PPR or half PPR. The floor is there. Then later in the draft, I'm targeting super high upside swing for the fences guys. But yeah, I love those slot wide receivers that are going to get the most looks on their team.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
so
the only thing I'll say about Humphries, and I'm going to let you go.
I love
I'm
Humphries.
going to pull a little Kanye here. But why? Is that your guy? Is that
Yeah,
the
it
guy
is.
you were going to?
It is. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So I don't have to sell him to you. I'll let you talk about Adam Humphries then, if that's the case.
No, I mean,
I thought you were
John,
going to say, if you were like, you're going to say Adam Humphries, I thought you were going to say something bad about Humphries. Like, wait a second. What do you mean?
No, because I've been
Okay.
on Adam Humphries since the day he landed in Tennessee, and everybody said I was crazy and I loved him too much.
I did
Anyways.
tell you that.
Devin Singletary was my guy there, but also there's 2 people that I think are really being underdrafted. I won't go really in depth. We'll start getting wrapping it up, but Peyton Barber I think still has a lot of value this late in drafts, especially, and so does Adrian Peterson. I am a big Darius Geis guy. He's still not even clear to play though. Adrian Peterson going as late as maybe the 10th round for a guy that had 1,000 yards last year. I know he's getting old, but if he has the opportunity, he gets a volume. Adrian Peterson still has a chance to get in the end zone. So Peyton Barber, Adrian Peterson, just off of opportunity, and then my guy was Adam Humphries. And I know you talked a little bit about Jamison Crowder, but Quincy Enunwa is kind of the same deal. I really, really like Sam Darnold this year. He's my sleeper quarterback. I know he's going way too late and almost undrafted in a lot of leagues. I'm stashing Sam Darnold. I think he has a chance to break in the top 15 quarterbacks, and he's going to have to throw it around. Of course, Le'Veon Bell is going to be a big part of that, but also Quincy Enunwa. I think he has what it takes.
All right. Well, Dale, as the Miami fan, let me ask you, is this the year for Devontae Parker?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
No, you
All right.
can't. You can't sell me.
They say it every year.
You can't
They
sell me
say
on
it every year.
any.
They're wrong
yeah,
every year.
They are wrong every year.
I know they do. Oh, Devontae Parker's going to be great this year. And I'm like, nah, no, he isn't.
He
But,
has
you know.
never finished above the wide receiver 50.
Yeah. Look,
Ever.
I am a Miami guy.
He stinks.
My dad grew up in Miami. He's a Miami guy. I was really, really, really close of disowning the team this year. That's how
Really?
bad it is. Yeah, I was. I hate the idea of tanking, and I get it. They made a move for Josh Rosen, which is great. At least that's somewhat looking in the future and kind of building. I don't even think they're even sold on him. I think they just want to sell the fan base. But Miami might be the worst team in the NFL this year.
Yeah, I like Flo a lot. I like Brian Flores a lot, and so, I think he has his own style. He's not going to try to be Belichick. I think he'll have some success down there. But you're right. I think it comes at a price, and he understands that it's not going to be overnight. So I am going to stick Patriots with my with my late round picks. Because I just figured let's do it. So for me, it's between 2 wide receivers: it's N'Keal Harry or it's Josh Gordon. And Josh Gordon hasn't even been reinstated into the NFL yet, but it's going to happen. I mean, if Tyreek Hill doesn't get suspended at all, then Josh Gordon had better be reinstated into the NFL. And so I think that that's going to happen at some point. And so if you get a guy like Gordon super late, then like what the hell? Why not? Now the problem with me is that I'm drafting against a lot of Patriots fans, and so if you're in the New England area, which most of the listeners here are, because you're listening to a Patriot show, then unfortunately you're going to be drafting against a lot of Patriots guys too that are going to be thinking about that. But if you're drafting and he's still available late, 10th, 11th, 12th round, somewhere around there, even later than that, if you wanted to wait, I think he's a guy that I would go after, because if he comes out, he's gonna make some noise. And Harry, same thing. I mean, I think Harry is a guy who uses his body very well. And, Brady has already spent the time and put the time in with him. It's clear that they want to turn him into an outside number one wide receiver. Whether that happens this year or not, we don't know. But they clearly are putting the effort in to do that. And I think when they're doing that, it tells you that they're going to target him and they're going to feature him quite a bit in the offense. And so he would be a guy, again, I'm going late because you have no idea what's going to happen. But in a later round pick, I'd go after N'Keal Harry. And a guy running back wise is Damian Harris. And it's very simple for me with Damian Harris. Sony Michel scares me. He scares me. His knee scares me. His durability scares me. He was great last year, and then he missed a lot of the beginning of training camp because his knee injury. He had a knee injury, and so those are knee injuries that have lingered since college. They said it might be bone on bone in there, so that scares me. So to me, I figure if you can get Damian Harris late, and he's not in a position where he's going to be starting for you, if Sony Michel does go down, this team has a willingness to run the football. Yeah. They want to run the football. They're committed to it. And I think Harris is a guy that, is the next man up if Michel goes down.
Good deal. I like it.
So anyways, I mean, any Patriots fans that have stuck all the way through, I appreciate that. I had to throw you a little bone there about the two late round guys. So, but that does it for the show, man. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's been obviously it's the first time with Pat's Pulpit, but it's been an annual thing the last few years, and I appreciate you guys taking the time out and talking. It's always fun. It's always a fun conversation, and always good to talk to you guys.
Yeah, it was. We'll send you the bill.
Yeah. All right. Listen, before you leave though, maybe this will offset the bill. Before you leave, why don't you just plug your show, what you guys are doing, and let people know where they can find you and reach out to you.
I'll let John be the salesman here.
Yeah, so eatsleepfantasy.com. That's where you're going to find all of our stuff, which is great. And having said that, find us on Twitter at EatSleepFF. You can find me at JL_Chapman. I also do a 49ers podcast called the 49ers Rush Pod, which if you want to get some Jimmy G love, if you miss him in his gorgeous face, head over there. But yeah,
his 5 straight interceptions.
And 5 straight throws today. He went 9 practices through training camp, 9 days without throwing an interception, and then he just hit the full-on Fitzpatrick power button.
He was trying new things.
Yeah, there you go.
Whatever.
He was throwing left-handed. I don't know, maybe.
Seeing how it feels to be Nathan Peterman.
Yeah, for real. Anyway, we'll see what happens.
So, yeah, eatsleepfantasy.com. It's a website. Go to it. Hit the subscribe
They don't
button.
get our inside jokes, Bill.
It's a website. Every time you say that, I'm like, yeah, I know it's a website. What do you mean?
Sorry. It's a habit. It's a habit for me. Anyways, go there. You click subscribe. You get all our rankings and all that stuff. A lot of free stuff. And then a couple things you can pay for to even get better and more information. So hit us up. Let us know if you have any questions fantasy-wise. We'll be happy to help you. Tell us you're one of Pat's friends when you email me.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I'll tell you what, I mean, for, just honestly for me, like I had never won a league before. And, I started listening to you guys and I started, following what you guys were doing and drafting with your tiers and everything. And, I won 3 leagues last year and I've been, competing for championships pretty much ever since. And no, that's not saying that that's going to happen every single time, you do that. But I think you guys do a great job. And I think for me, the more effort you put in, the more you're going to get out. And so if you're playing fantasy football and you're not listening to podcasts or, going through rankings or listening to people talk about what their ideas are, you're not doing enough if you really care about it. And so, and for me, it's about finding the people that you trust. So when Dale says something or John says something or Christian or Armando or, whoever it is that's on the show, when you guys say something, I can trust that you guys know what you're doing. You've done your research. And so, for me, it's important to have guys you can trust, but also do that homework.
Sure. We appreciate that, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, man.
All right, buddy. Talk to you later.
All right. See ya.
All right, guys. Thanks again for listening to that. I hope you got some good insight and information on your next draft coming up. I know everybody's drafting in the next couple of weeks, so hopefully this, with the sleepers kind of, or the late round guys that we mentioned, hopefully that helps, and just all around good fantasy talk. So I hope you enjoyed it. So before we go, again, I want to mention, go to our website, Eat Sleep Fantasy, for all fantasy information, our rankings and all that stuff. Also, the banner for Nitrogen Sports. Don't forget about Nitrogen Sports banner on top of our page. They are the #1 Bitcoin betting website on the internet. You bet on everything. I think esports. I know Christian loves the esports stuff. I pretty much stick to football. Maybe I'll start betting on basketball later this year, or when the new season comes up. But besides that, don't forget, you guys get into the free NFL Survivor Pool to win credits, to actually win real money. They pay out in Bitcoin, so that means no more waiting for checks for weeks like you do on some of the other sites. You actually get the Bitcoin, you cash it out right there, however you want to do it. There are a lot of different ways nowadays to look at Bitcoin and play with that. So don't forget, go on our website, click the banner for Nitrogen Sports. Good stuff over there, really good people to work with. So support our partners because they support us. We appreciate it. All right, well, for John Chapman, Pat Lane, and myself, we appreciate you listening and downloading, and we will talk to you guys tomorrow. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Eat, sleep, fantasy, you rockin' with the best. NFL Fantasy Football Podcast. We talking mock drafts, running backs, better follow the conversation with
John,
Dale, Christian, and Armando. Screaming Eat Nation, we doing what we like. Tune in every week, guarantee we get it hype. Fantasy, football enthusiasts, I know you plan to be joining us on Eat, Sleep, Fantasy. Yeah, Eat, Sleep, Fantasy. Eat, Sleep, Fantasy.